Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike Little, Mayor for the District of North Vancouver. It's a pleasure falls to me to welcome everybody here to the special meeting of Council for Monday, December 4th at 5 o'clock. Council, we have an agenda that's been circulated. Any errors or omissions from the agenda as presented? Hearing none, will someone please move adoption of the agenda? Moved by Councillor Hanson, second by Councillor Murray. Call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. So this is a special meeting of council. And so again, all that means is that back in December of last year, when we set up the calendar of events for council meetings for the 2023 year, this meeting was not on the list. And so we have added it since that time in order to be able to consider one particular matter, which is the 2024 to 2028 capital plan. But this is a full regular meeting of council in largely all other respects, except I don't think we have planned to do a public input period at the front end like we would for a regular meeting. Don't worry, our 7 o'clock meeting will have all of those trappings added into them as a regular meeting. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to call on our staff to make the presentation for the 2024 to 2028 capital plan. We have Peter Cohen and Rick Daniluk here to make that presentation. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Little, and good evening, council and members of the public listening in. Tonight's special meeting on the capital plan follows the November 14th financial plan workshop, where staff provided an update on the capital plan and the proposed property tax increase for next year. Tonight's staff are seeking early approval of the capital plan and further direction on the property tax increase. Peter Cohen, our Deputy General Manager of Engineering, is here with me to walk you through the details of the capital plan, and other staff are in attendance to answer any other questions you may have. The 2024 budget is both conservative and realistic as we seek to keep the tax rate as low as possible, maintain service levels in the community, and implement council's priorities. It includes significant investments in transportation and housing, as well as new investments in each of the other corporate goals. We anticipate higher than typical construction costs to continue into next year, and we'll also need to address the uncertainty created through the new provincial legislation on housing. This slide summarizes the direction we're seeking and includes a statement on the work we're undertaking on development finance. Early approval of the capital plan will ultimately reduce costs and enable more progress on council priorities. Rising costs through the collective agreement, delivering infrastructure projects on the North Shore, and changes to our police services result in a 7% increase to maintain service levels in 2024. At the November 14th workshop, council expressed support for maintaining service levels and addressing the infrastructure deficit sooner. To accommodate this, staff have included a target savings of 0.5% in order to begin reinstating contributions for infrastructure renewal in 2024. Staff will be bringing back options to realize the target savings in the spring, including scaling back the capital plan in the outer years. To keep pace with the impacts of growth on our infrastructure, development finance bylaws will be amended by the end of June of 2024, including the development cost charges bylaw and a new amenity cost charges bylaw. Tonight's presentation is organized into 5 parts. Mr. Cohen will be presenting the capital plan details and highlights of the 5-year plan. The financial planning process actually began last April, where the new council adopted the 5-year financial plan bylaw, following a robust communications and engagement process that encouraged resident input. Council amended that plan this November 6th to reflect rising construction costs. The plan before you tonight, the 2024 to 2028 capital plan, was introduced at the November 14th workshop and is not materially different than the plan adopted by council last spring. It reflects previous direction and has been adjusted for rising costs, and now includes the next year in the plan, 2028. Staff will be introducing the draft financial plan workbook on January 8th, which will be followed by a public input period, council deliberations, and first 3 readings on the financial plan bylaw on February 5th. As this is a rolling plan, it's important to keep the plan as current as possible to provide clear direction to staff and ensure the appropriate spending authority is in place to advance council's priorities. Following adoption of the financial plan bylaw, there will be opportunities for council to further amend the financial plan next spring and fall. Over the next few slides, I'll review the capital plan at a high level and provide an update on the status of our infrastructure funding. The 5-year capital plan is summarized here in order of the primary corporate plan goal that they support. The plan is broken into investments that sustain our infrastructure, shown at $212 million, and investments in new capital with a total of $338 million. By approving the capital plan tonight, Council is authorizing staff to proceed with the next year of the plan. As finance and engineering work through the upcoming year-end process, we'll be reviewing open capital and identifying opportunities to scale back the outer years of the plan, and proposed changes identified will work their way through the financial plan amendment next spring. The capital plan funding is funded through ongoing contributions to reserves or borrowing, or through contributions from others. Roughly 60% of the capital plan is funded through the district's reserves and borrowing. The plan is fully funded in the early years, but there are minor funding gaps in the outer years of the plan, where some reserve funds supporting new investments run negative by the end of 2028. We'll be looking at financial strategies to improve those reserve fund balances later on in the presentation. In terms of asset management, the district has long been a leader in asset management in the province, and at the November 14th workshop, there was general support from council to address the infrastructure deficit sooner. Staff have reflected that direction in the plan, and that direction can be seen in this slide here. An additional 0.5% for infrastructure funding is now added in 2024, and an additional 1% is added to the tax levy in each of the subsequent years. That's the area shaded green shown as additional funding. That funding closes a shortfall and approaches target levels of investment over the next 10 years that is aimed at sustaining our existing infrastructure in a state of good repair. Engineering and finance will continue to look at new ways to close the infrastructure funding gap, including reviewing asset utilization and potentially decommissioning underutilized assets and consolidating some of our assets, such as our facilities in the future. The new housing legislation will also have impacts on our infrastructure, and it'll take some time to address this. But our approach to funding this new challenge remains the same. We have a set of guiding financial principles. We follow them, and with the new legislation, we'll be looking to make sure that any new growth resulting from that legislation is paid for through growth. With that, I'll pass it over to Peter for the next part of the presentation.
Thanks, Rick, and good evening, Council. So Rick has just walked you through a little bit of the context setting for this evening, and shortly I'd like to do a bit of a deep dive into the details of what is proposed in the 5-year capital plan. Before I dive into that detail, though, Council may be wondering why we bring this capital approval request forward so much earlier than we typically do. As a reference point, the 2023 capital plan was approved in April of this year. As an organization that works around an annual budgeting cycle, this typical capital approval that seems to be several months into the calendar year does create some challenges in effective capital delivery. This slide is intended to provide you with a little bit of this context. It shouldn't be a surprise, but summer is the most ideal time of the year for us to be doing our construction. There's good weather and there's good productivity. We can also take advantage of school summer vacation periods as well. But before we put shovels in the ground, we need to approach the market for many of our larger projects through a procurement process. And the fall of every year is the right time of year for us to be approaching the industry. It's the time of year when many organizations are approaching the market and contractors are wanting to get certainty on what projects they'll be doing in the following year, which ultimately means it's more competitive. We do know that if we do our bread and butter infrastructure projects and we tender them after the holiday period in say Q1 or Q2, we typically see higher rates coming back to us. In order for us to award a contract though on a project, we must have that year's capital plan approved by council. And once a contract is awarded, there needs to be around 2 or 3 months for our contractors to organize themselves and mobilize onto site. If we look at our historical approach here, I hope you can see that if we approve our capital budget in, say, March or April of a typical year, we really aren't able to take the full advantage of a good summer construction season. As contractors probably can't mobilize until well into June or July, or potentially later on if they've already been booked up on other projects. What this all entails is it pushes us closer into inclement fall weather, which may drive up costs, it may move out our schedules, or it may move us into the following year as well. The key takeaway here is that the closer that we can ideally approve our capital plan to the fall tendering period, the higher our chances are of getting better pricing. The draft 5-year plan is broken down into 8 themes, and I'll provide you with a 1-slide summary for each that highlights the key initiatives we plan to be delivering. At the bottom right on each slide indicates the corporate goal that our proposed investment is supporting. Please note that these summaries clearly aren't exhaustive, but they do highlight some of the bigger initiatives that we know may be on the radar of council or of our community as well. To begin, we often hear from council that 2 of the biggest priorities we have are transportation and housing. So let's start there. With transportation over the next 5 years, we plan to invest approximately $180 million in transportation improvements relating to active transportation, roads and bridges, and transit. For active transportation, we plan to deliver an important council and community priority from last year of the eastern extension of the Spirit Trail out to Deep Cove. Currently, we plan for construction to commence next year around the Seymour River area, with the full extension anticipated to be completed by 2027. Engagement on that project will be starting early in the new year. Other active transportation improvements are also planned, including expansion of our urban trail and sidewalk networks, continuing our goal for implementing priority cycling routes that connect our town centers and key destinations, and a focus on how we can improve the safety for those that travel to and from schools. For roads and bridges, we continue our ongoing asset management program to ensure we best keep up with any aging infrastructure. Over the next 5 years, we see bridge replacements being needed at Adjournment and near McKay Creek, and road rehabilitation upgrades along Lynn Valley Road. We also have annual ongoing programs relating to lighting upgrades, along with our recently approved strategy moving forward for our road safety and traffic calming programs. And lastly, we continue the road infrastructure needs to build out our town centers. We also continue to support transit improvements. This could be through improving the comfort of transit users through things like bus stop upgrades or coordinating district infrastructure or circulation improvements with better transit service here in the district. Separate to the content on this slide is the work that our team does in supporting TransLink, the Ministry of Transportation, and other regional agencies on their really important regional transportation initiatives as well. All of these collectively help support our OCP goal of getting 35% of people walking, cycling, or taking transit by 2030. Moving from transportation, the next area of focus in the proposed 5-year capital plan is in supporting the delivery of affordable housing, particularly social and supportive housing. As shown on this slide, by the end of 2022, the district had approved just over 2,200 social and supportive housing units. Over the next 5 years, our capital plan forecasts investing roughly $20 million and allocating an additional 3.2 hectares of district land to support the delivery of almost 900 additional units. And if we're able to achieve this, it would put us well ahead of our 2030 OCP target. The key takeaway is that our affordable housing program continues to be an important component of our financial plan. And if our 5-year capital plan is approved and realized, it would mean a 40% increase in the number of affordable housing units here in the district over the next 5 years. Beyond transportation and housing, the next theme of our capital plan I'd like to share relates to climate action. Our proposed plan has a number of facets that make up both the adaptation and the mitigation of a changing climate, with our upcoming 5 years proposing to invest more than $16 million. With our adaptation measures, we continue to upgrade and improve our highest priority drainage channels and culverts across the district so that they can pass higher flows as storms become more intense. We're also blessed to have an incredible natural backyard here on the North Shore, but with a changing climate, it increases the risk of potential wildfires. And so our 5-year plan includes funding to continue managing that risk, such as fuel breaks. The district has also declared a climate and ecological emergency, and one component of that is to continued work on our biodiversity strategy. And then on mitigation measures, a couple of items to highlight is that we continue to improve and update our energy use at district facilities as our part to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, along with our continued expansion of publicly available EV charging stations. Our capital plan also includes our continued investment in our utility asset management needs, along with the public works services that we provide. Over the next 5 years, we will continue to upgrade, replace, and expand our utility networks across the district, such as replacing storm and sewer mains and upgrading pump stations. These things, once they are built, are often things our community doesn't really think about, which is a good thing I see. And so keeping on top of our asset management strategies is fundamental in maintaining a functioning utility network. On the solid waste side, one thing to highlight in the coming years is that we will continue to deploy garbage compacting containers as we continue to see benefit of using these at strategic locations. Community facilities is a cornerstone in fostering our community's well-being through the arts and culture, and we continue to plan for capital investment. At the Parkgate Rec Centre, we plan to electrify the aging mechanical system and expand the area of cooling. This won't only improve the overall comfort of users, but also continues our efforts to improve our resiliency to a changing climate. Our team will also continue planning efforts for the replacement of Ron Andrews Community Centre in the Seymour Maplewood area, along with completing Lynn Creek Community Centre and that fit out. For our library facilities, we plan to undertake a refresh at our library locations at Lynn Valley, Parkgate, and Capilano that aims to improve functionality to better support the delivery of their existing services. Our proposed 5-year capital plan also responds to our community's growing needs for parks and open spaces, with over $50 million in investment planned in the coming years. For our local community parks, we plan to deliver upgrades at Myrtle Park, undertake phase 2 of Sealand Park, and continue park planning around Maplewood. At our district level parks, one of the key highlights of our plan is at Wayawich and Kates, where we plan to replace the existing washrooms and create a new ranger station. With all of this being done in close collaboration with the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. Also, we plan to continue to expand our successful paid parking program in our larger parks, with capital investment set aside to implement this at Deep Cove Park, Panorama Park, and Wayawich and Kates. New neighbourhood parks are also planned in Lynn Creek, Lynn Valley, and outside of the town centres. On the sports field front, the 5-year plan includes capital investment into a number of artificial turf fields, or ATFs, that we know are a top priority for this community. The capital plan includes delivering new ATFs at Inter River and at Handsworth, converting 2 existing gravel fields, and replacing the ATF at Windsor. Keeping our community safe is also an important aspect to the capital investment. In the spring of next year, we plan to complete construction of the Maplewood Fire and Rescue Centre, the largest capital project delivery currently being led by the district. In addition, in the coming years, we plan for upgrades at Fire Hall 4 in Parkgate, along with the need to replace Fire Hall 5 in Norgate. For policing services, we would also like to highlight improvements planned for the call centre. The last theme of our proposed 5-year capital plan relates to our own civic facilities and the technology that we use. For our buildings, we plan to improve the workspaces at both the hall and the operations centre, and this is to support our changed working environment in recent years, along with planning for the update and renewal of systems as they reach their end of life. With technology, our capital plan includes investment into improving our website, reporting on our corporate performance, and improve business systems for project management and financial planning so that we can enhance the digital infrastructure that is now so critical to supporting the work that our staff do every day. I'll shortly hand back to Rick to finish off the presentation, but I hope over the last few minutes, I've provided an overview to you that demonstrates a broad and substantial capital plan that's proposed for the next 5 years. And as you will hopefully have seen, it is mainly unchanged from what we shared with you last year. Importantly, it does 3 things. It continues to support our corporate goals, it moves forward many council and community priorities, and it ensures we are responsibly managing, adapting, and expanding our large infrastructure inventory. Thanks for listening, and I'll now hand back to Rick to finish off the slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Now that you have the additional information on the capital plan, we'll take a very brief look at funding, starting with the financial strategies. This slide highlights the financial strategies that were shared at the November 4th workshop and adds potential financial impacts and timing. A comprehensive review of our financial strategies is underway, and staff plan on bringing back recommendations to council each spring. The most impactful strategies on the screen shown are development finance, advocacy, and property tax strategies. These are the areas that we're currently focused on. The work on development finance was mentioned earlier in the presentation, and staff will be focused on integrating the impacts from the new provincial legislation so we can begin collecting the updated contributions from development by the end of June next year. With major infrastructure projects being undertaken in the region, advocating for the district's financial interests will also have major impacts on our ratepayers. Related to that, we continue our work with the province and the region in our efforts through municipal finance reform. On property taxes, potential changes to legislation is also expected to impact our ratepayers over the long term, including a review of the Ports Property Tax Act, amongst other legislation. There's a long list of other opportunities being explored. One of them was mentioned earlier on paid parking in some of our major parks. This list is currently being worked on, will be updated on an annual basis, and will help to keep our tax rates as low as possible. The key takeaway here is it's a comprehensive review of the strategies, and council will be updated each spring. Moving on to the reserve funds, one of the more significant contributors to funding the capital plan. This slide provides an overview of our capital reserves over the next 5 years. It's shown in thousands. The funds can be broken into 4 major groups: existing capital, lands and housing, new capital, and development. On the development, on the right-hand side, you can see it ends in a fairly healthy position. There's typically a timing difference between expected development funds and capital project spend, which results in the favorable variance that you see on the screen. Over the 10-year period, these funds are currently showing moving into a deficit position without the changes to our current development charging rates. You can see on the column on the left, shaded green, that the funds start at an opening balance of 122 million and end slightly higher at 130 million. That said, the new capital funds in the middle, under the heading New Capital and Initiatives, end in a negative balance by the end of 2028. Staff will be reviewing the financial strategies to bring these funds back into a healthier position over the 5-year period. Moving on to debt financing. Borrowing is also supporting the 5-year capital plan, with currently 34 million included. The important indicator here is our ability to service debt, and debt payments are shown here as a percentage of our ongoing tax revenue, and are currently well below. This indicator is currently well below 10%. So there is some flexibility with borrowing over the next 5 years, and an additional 15 million would increase the district's debt as a percentage of revenue to approximately 7%, where it currently ends at about 6.1 in 2028. And just moving to this summary, this budget is both conservative and realistic as we seek to keep tax rates as low as possible and maintain service levels, as well as implement council's priorities. Early approval of the capital plan will lead to more competitive pricing and more progress on those priorities. Staff will continue reviewing financial strategies, and we'll be bringing back the capital plan for amendment next spring. We are also seeking direction to prepare the draft financial plan based on a 6.5% property tax increase to maintain service levels, plus an additional 0.5% to begin addressing the infrastructure deficit. And that concludes our presentation. We're happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. I'll be moving a staff recommendation. Is there a seconder on the matter? Second by Councillor Ma. Thank you very much for the presentation, both Peter and Rick. I guess my questions right out of the gate, you use the phrase conservative and realistic, and I guess one of the question marks I have is about our ability to deliver at this kind of expected level of throughput. And so I seem to recall we've had presentations before where our normal amount of project deliverables in a given year was about $65 million per year, that we were really pushing it, getting into the $80 million per year. This projected 5-year plan has $110 million per year in expected capital projects. Now, obviously, a portion of that is being delivered by private industry as a developer builds out the area in and around there. But you say conservative and realistic. Can we project that's a pace that our staffing infrastructure can actually manage over the 5-year period?
I'll start with a couple of comments and pass it over to Peter. Looking at the numbers, there's definitely an increase in the capital spending, especially since the introduction of the project management framework. And we'll be working together through the year-end process to tighten up where we can and bring back amendments through the spring. I'll leave it to Peter to address more.
Yeah, to add to Rick's comments, Mayor Little, one of the pieces that we are very mindful in terms of our internal capacity to deliver. The threshold we utilize is $70 million for internally delivered capital. That's kind of where we're seeing as kind of the sweet spot. But a lot, as you indicated before, there is a lot that is also privately delivered through development. That's all been taken into consideration in terms of what's been brought before council.
So it probably will average out with our portion being about 70 million per year in terms of throughput.
Yes, we use that cap for planning purposes. Yeah.
The debt financing burden that you addressed at the tail end of the presentation, that's also another concern of mine, is that we've committed to projects in our plan that align with our principles. In terms of deliverables in the community identified in the official community plan and other planning processes that we have. But we've gone up significantly in terms of how much debt we're going to be financing. My math said it was somewhere in that we'd be holding about $90 million in debt by the time we get to about 2027, which is a significantly higher amount of debt. Can you speak to what is a healthy amount of debt for a municipality our size, maybe where we fit in the Metro Vancouver context as far as debt exposure at that peak?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. We monitor debt levels across the province and especially in the region. Municipalities in the region are very conservative, typically below 10%. There are some municipalities in the province trending well above 10%. So what is the healthy level? I mean, that is the $1 million question. What's the right balance between borrowing and realizing benefits today and deferring those benefits? And so we're looking at $3.5 billion worth of infrastructure. That's the update from the engineers over the summer. It's not, in my opinion, an unmanageable level, the amount that we currently have on the books. You mentioned 90 million. That's true. That's the amount that we'll be borrowing. It should settle down to about 70 million by the end of the 5-year period. And there are new financial strategies bringing on new ongoing sources of revenue that could finance investments that the community would like to see, and council has made a priority. So we're very aware of those debt levels, and we can bring back to council some limits to make sure that we're working within them. The current levels, I think, are well within our ability to manage.
So there you go. The last comment said there, so you're $70 to $90 million potential at our peak over the next 5 years. You think that is still very manageable for a municipality our size? And
absolutely.
Thank you very much. Okay. Councillor Ma, your comments?
Thank you to Rick and Peter and the staff for doing work. I can tell there's been a lot of hours put into this. And Rick and I had a quick discussion earlier. The one thing that I'm concerned about is the 7%, 6.5 plus 5, 7% increase. What I would like to see from staff when this next year, is to see if we wanted to reduce our taxes and reduce the level of service, what options would we have? Right now, I don't see a lot of options that we can consider. I know that council did say that last month that we wanted to maintain the level of service, but what I would like to see also is some options, at the next planning cycle.
Through your worship, we certainly take inventory of the services and the rate of investment, and can put together additional information to put those services into context. It is a very intensive exercise getting into a full ranking and review of the services. So maybe I'll leave that
Mr. Stewart?
back to Mr. Stewart.
Your worship, fairly shortly, we'll be able to distribute a draft copy of a survey.
Just not in. There you go.
So we'll be distributing a draft copy of a survey. We've gone back to 1992 and looked at all the different variations on the surveys that we've done, what areas that we've asked about, and what areas we haven't. And so I'll be coming to council with that. And certainly, if we're looking at making adjustments to services going back into the early to mid 90s, we would ask that question as to how people would not only rank the service, but do they want to see it improved or they want to see it decreased, and what does that do to the financial picture? So you'll have that in January to take a look at.
Councilor Mott, your comments are complete. Thank you very much. I've got Councilors Murray and Hanson. Councilor Murray, your comments, please.
I had a survey company phone me on the weekend and asked me to do a survey for the government of Canada. I'm not listening. I had a survey company phone me on the weekend. They wanted to do a survey from the government of Canada, asked me what the biggest issue is in the country. And I was like, I'm not doing this survey. If you're asking me what the biggest issue in the country is, like, honestly. So I don't know really how much surveys are useful. Because often you're asking a question to get a certain answer. And I think that's part of the challenge. Why do we want to be $70 to $90 million in debt? I remember when $25 million that we borrowed to build 5 public facilities in the district was a huge amount for the municipality. You know, Rick and I had a good conversation today about, you know, the budget and the capital plan and how we're going to make some changes going forward. How we can look at these documents and have them make more sense, tiering them in levels where we can do a deep dive. I haven't really seen the deep dive in the presentation. If this is what we call a deep dive, then I'm concerned. I'm so concerned about going forward at 7%. I guess what I've always been taught is you shouldn't dip into your savings account if you can reduce your spending. And we're dipping into our savings account, reducing the amount of money that we put in our savings account. And I don't see a reduction in our spending. I see more spending than we've ever done on a lot of projects that we might not have to do right now. And again, that's the other tier, the other level that you and I talked about today. What do we need to do to move forward? What is discretionary? What can we look at and maybe say, we're not going to head into that direction right now. We don't need to do that. I think we also need to understand what staff need to move on to finish some projects, or to move on something that started and we're doing a second phase that's required. And what is council driving? What initiatives are we driving that is increasing that debt load or increasing that tax increase? And I don't think we have that information. You know, it may be in here somewhere, like not even here, in some other computer document downstairs. But I just don't see that information. And I worry that when the mayor asked the question, because I was going to ask the exact question, do we have the capacity? I think financially, if we keep borrowing, we have the capacity. But when Mr. Joyce walks out the door, when Mr. Stewart walks out the door, you know, when we've got all of this corporate history walking out the door, is it the right time to be borrowing this much? Is it the right time to be spending this much when we're in such a, you know, a very unique spot in our history. We haven't been here. We've had, you know, different levels of experience walk out, but not all at the same time. And I think there is that capacity issue to let, you know, the new complement of employees in this municipality get to that place where it's more comfortable and there's some seniority. it worries me that, I mean, I think you're the longest tenure, Mr. Danik, after these two. You know, there's that, we have to understand what that means going forward, because we're in a very precarious spot. I'm running out of time. I'll come back.
Mr. Danik, response?
Through your worship to Councillor Mary, I certainly appreciate those comments and do believe that we can improve the level and quality of information that we're presenting. I'll only add that we are guided by financial principles and council direction. Those guiding financial principles generally are maintaining service levels within the community. That's what these capital investments are doing. And when they're not, they're actually increasing service levels through council direction to improve transportation, improve housing, and make a difference in climate action. But absolutely, we can do a better job improving the quality information that you're seeing.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillors Hanson back and Forbes. Councillor Hanson, your comments, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. For my part, I do believe we've struck broadly the right balance. I am pleased to see that our initiatives essentially remain underway. Our service levels essentially remain underway. 7%, yes, that's a significant increase, but it's, as I understand, in line with the region. It's consistent with price escalations broadly. And I'm pleased to see that we've now found a mechanism to put 0.5% with respect to infrastructure. And I do believe that's an important goal of this community. Just on the topic of the debt, and we've been talking about 70 and 90 million, and perhaps for the benefit of the public, could you tell us the mechanism whereby these funds are borrowed? Who do we actually borrow them from? What types of rates are paid on them? What are the repayment terms? And what assumptions do we need to make with respect to the cost of that borrowing and potential interest rates that we're going to be paying? Thank you.
Through your worship, Councillor Hanson, we borrow through the Municipal Finance Authority, the MFA. The way it's structured, our borrowings are handled regionally through Metro Vancouver. The rates are secured over a 10-year period and renewed in 5-year chunks thereafter. The next major debt issue is planned for the spring of 2024. We were planning for that rate to be in the range of 4.75. It's since declined. MFA's rate for, I believe, posted on the website today is in the range of 4.5. And rates are predicted to decline further, but we'll see what happens. We work closely with the staff in the MFA and look out at least over a 3-year time horizon to have an idea about where they think in their experience rates might be headed, and they're usually pretty good predictors.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Back.
Yes, thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you very much to both Rick and Peter for your presentation and for the work that's gone into this. I am generally supportive of the direction that we're going, and I think it is very much about striking that balance. I don't want to see property tax increases as high as they are, just like anyone else around this table. But if we look at the time that we're in, we have a housing crisis like we've never seen before. We have a climate emergency that continues to worsen, and we have important investments that we need to make that the previous council and councils prior to that initiated. So I feel like we do need to continue moving forward on a lot of these key priorities. I can appreciate that staff are going to be coming back in the spring to look at ways to scale back in the outer years of the capital plan. I'll be interested to see what some of those options might look like. I just want to reiterate that so many of the initiatives that are in our 5-year plan are going to make our community more inclusive and more accessible, whether they be investments in active transportation, affordable housing. All of these things I think are are so important for both current and future residents of the district. So I'm supportive, recognizing that these are high property tax increases, but my hope is that, in a year or two, hopefully things will start to settle a little bit, which is what I've heard. And hopefully that's the case. And as we look around the region, we're not the only one, obviously, in this situation. And again, I want to thank you for your work and kind of trying to find that balance. So I am supportive. Thank you.
Very much. Councillor Forbes, your comments, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just going to make a couple of general comments. I'm supportive of the work you've done here and I realize how much behind the scenes to get to here. So thank you. Some of the things that I'm concerned about have already been mentioned. Like, I'd like to see projects that maybe aren't going into their second phase or haven't started, that are possible to be maybe delayed until the general financial environment gets a little more favorable. So I'd really like to see that, not just because it was suggested by council last year, or the year before, that we just continue on. Is there some things that aren't just maintaining our current services, but maybe are going above and beyond? Because what I'm really concerned about is that we're spending more than we really can afford to do. And maybe we have to reduce services, not to necessarily get a reduction in property taxes, just to be able to stay at a financial stable level, because so much is changing. The financial environment everywhere now is just, nobody can figure out what's going on except you guys. So I am concerned about that. I also was concerned, I sent a number of questions to you, Rick, but they didn't really impact what our decision was tonight, but I appreciate that you're going to answer them. But I'm also concerned about, I noticed an awful lot of things being pushed out to the outer years, and I realize that's because of financial availability any sooner, and maybe reclassifying what we want to do. But I'm concerned about some things that are really being pushed out to the years, with the idea that some people might think, well, it's in the 5-year plan, so in year 4 you can't stop this. Do you sort of understand? It's not I mean, it's a plan, but it's not in cement. So some of the things, the amount of things that are being pushed out, actually, there's quite a few that are going out to the later years, and I'm kind of concerned about that. And I agree with Councillor Murray that if there's anything that council is driving costs on, that I think we need to hear that. We need to hear that, this is adding a lot more cost. I know we've started a couple more, or we've had a couple new positions in departments, and that draws down resources, staff and money. So I'm concerned about that. Are we driving, the business agent and the climate section, are we driving too much there? In your analysis, I'd really appreciate it. In these numbers here, they don't allow for any federal or provincial grants we might get in the future, correct?
Generally, no.
Okay, so it might get a little bit easier with grants, maybe. The water, waste and sewer plant, we don't have those numbers in here either, do we? And what do you think that number might be? I know you don't really know till April, but I mean, it's not going to be cheap. So we're still looking at quite a bit more for that's on top of this. And do you know if that's being spread over the regional district, or is North Vancouver bearing the full brunt of those costs?
Through your worship to Councillor Forbes, we're not sure about that at this time. That's all under review.
Yeah. That's why I think your hands are tied.
I might be able to add that to that, though. If the region does not agree to change the existing policy, then it will fall on our sub area. And so while we are still waiting on a decision on whether the region will shoulder some of the cost, at the moment, it will be on our sub area.
Just a quick question. Are they looking at changing their amortization period?
They have already done that.
They have.
Yes. Mr. Danwick?
You're correct. They have extended the amortization period from 15 to 30 years already for our plant, and they're looking at extending it for the region.
Great, that's good news. School board taxes, we don't know yet, correct? So that's on top of this as well. I think, I believe in sort of for lack of a better term, sort of the words that are going around with inclusivity and accessibility, and I believe in all of that. But if you don't have it, you can't spend it, or you really shouldn't spend it. So I just am concerned about that. So anything that you could provide council with what we could maybe defer until we know what the financial climate's going to be, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you very much. First time speaker, Councillor Pope.
Yeah. I think we're being asked to ask staff to bring back options in April 2024 to scale back years 2025 to 2028 of the capital plan. Is that correct? So I have enormous concerns about scaling back what we have fought so hard for to get on the agenda, namely active transportation and climate and so many other things, including the things that this community has been demanding for years, such as the ATFs and outdoor recreation. The reason we are spending more now than ever before, I believe, is because previous councils, the majority, voted to keep taxes low versus providing services that this community is demanding. And so obviously that came at a huge cost, because now we have people and this community wanting all these services and demanding them, and we need to provide them. So I want us to keep that in mind. And I am actually one of the few on council here who I think disagrees with the conservative policy of reinstating the 1% asset management policy. And the reason is, I just don't think this is the time for saving, actually, when things are so tight and the costs are so high. This is not the time to spend, save. The time to save is when times are good, which is a more progressive view of things, I believe. So I'm actually opposed to, adding that into the amount that taxpayers are going to have to spend next year because of an overall asset management plan. And part of that falls under my philosophy that, again, I think we have to stop looking at buildings and maintaining our assets of buildings, because people don't live in buildings as much anymore. So for example, when we look at upgrading libraries and spending $10 million to upgrade, say, the Parkgate Library, well, really, shouldn't we have a plan in place for future uses of that library first, and a business case before us to say that, we actually want to upgrade the AC due to, the overall climate warming? Well, is that going to be a warming center or a cooling center in the future? Are these questions being asked now? Because if we're going to be spending, millions on upgrading buildings to become cooling centers, I think we need to decide in advance if indeed those are the right buildings to be upgraded for that purpose, and those kinds of bigger picture questions. So those are my comments from now. Thank you.
Mr. Stewart, do you have additional comments?
Just a brief one, Your Worship. Just to clarify any perhaps misunderstanding, when we're reinstating that 0.5%, it's just allowing us to spend money on infrastructure. It's not a matter of tucking it away somewhere. It just means projects which we were going to have to defer because we didn't have the money. We now have some. That's simple.
Yeah, since the reserves are the source of fund for much of the infrastructure that we are committed to through the plan. So, sorry, just before I go to Councillor Murray, I was going to just ask for my second 2 minutes here, just a question. When we had the discussion last year, well, last year, 8 months ago, we spent a fair amount of time talking about the tail, as it were, you know, that we were getting into a situation where we were in a pattern where the amount of projects committed to in a given year couldn't actually be delivered for supply chain reasons, for throughput capacity, our own issues. I asked some questions in the first go round about our capacity and ability to, but I just want to really nail it down to this question of the tail, which we talked about a lot last time. Does this present a plan that is going to end up with us reducing the amount of tail, the amount of projects that are committed to yet can't be delivered during that time for whatever reason? I guess, Ed, could you talk about that for a minute?
Sure. When I look at the current trend on the rate of spend and our ability to close out projects, if that trend continues, it should reduce the tail over the 5-year period. So I'm noticing an improvement on an annual basis, and so we will expect that to continue. There will be projects carrying over into 2024, but we will expect more work to be done in 2024 than we saw done in 2023.
Thank you. Mr. Cohen?
Yeah, Mayor Little, just to add to what Rick has identified, we are every year attempting to or intending to reduce our capital tail. We see that moving forward long term, roughly $15 to $20 million, is just going to be naturally going to be rolled over to future years, just as part of how project delivery gets done. We have improved our project management framework to really increase that maturity on the planning side, so that we can be requesting money more appropriately and ensuring that we are getting to a capital tail that's a lot more manageable. But the key point is we are continuing each year to digging away at that capital tail.
So assuming that we're able to address capital in the as early in the process as we can, assuming the labor environment stabilizes, assuming a lot of things, this plan will still result in a smaller tail as we move forward, where we're catching up to the projects we've committed to.
Yes.
That was just how it was described in the last go round, was that we were, Mr. Joyce.
Your worship, council budgets for a certain amount of money that they give to the departments to spend. And money that isn't spent, we've put a name on it called the tail.
Yeah.
And so that money sits there because we can't spend it. And multiple reasons we can't spend it. It might be resources, staff not available, contractors not available. And what you're hearing from Mr. Cohen this evening, if the later on we were in the budget year, the more difficult it is to get contracts to do the work, obviously, because they're booked up for that year. And it is a real struggle on the North Shore, as we've heard, to get contractors. So the mayor's comment, the good news, I just crunched the numbers, 25% better than we were last year with this tail, meaning we're getting more work out the door than we did at this point last year. So the tail is going down, if you will. But you're correct in your assumption. We can internally spend about $70 million is our capacity based on what we have here at the hall and the OC, and the rest is delivered by outside forces. While I've got the floor, council can really think of it as 3 buckets. The first one's asset management, and that's maintaining what we own and have to look after. The second one is developer-driven projects based on growth through areas that we need to produce based on your OCP and plans. And the third one is new capital or initiatives that council and staff bring forward, like ATFs and the Spirit Trails. And those are the 3 buckets. And we take all of that and we try to roll out a 5-year plan within our $70 million framework and deliver that to council. And then there's some discussion about where council's priorities are and where projects line in the outer years and what we can deliver. And that's part of this process we're discussing tonight and next year.
You. And while the clerk was just mentioning to me that since this is the only item on the agenda tonight, he has given me 4 minutes for a second time speaking. And so I do intend to extend that to the rest of council. I don't need the second 4 minutes, but at the same time, just wanted to make sure that it's very important for us to be able to discuss the capital plan. And also we're still going to be finishing rather early as it is. So at this point, I think that is an objective we should be pursuing, which is to try to reduce that tail. I get that many of the pieces that lead into that are outside of our control, but it should still be part of our strategy moving forward. I think that it's reasonable for people in the community when they hear us commit to a project that we can be fairly definitive on when we are going to be able to deliver that it's not going to slip and slip and slip. And one of the key ways to do that is to get that tail down so that we can actually deliver projects when we say we're going to deliver them. So I'm supportive of that. Second time speaker, I have Councillors Murray and Pope. Councillor Murray, your comments?
More flexibility because we have a whole hour and I have questions. I thought we were going to have a bit more of a easier sort of exchange of questions and discussion. We talked, Mr. Joyce, so the 3 buckets, that is more visual for me, own, developer, and new. But like, and 25% reduction in that tail compared to what? Mr. Daniluk and I were talking today, and it was like this comparison with other municipalities, where they are, how much they're borrowing, what their tax rate is. But I don't care about being compared to other municipalities. I'm concerned about what we're doing. Councillor Forbes asked about borrowing. What happens when we hit a borrowing peak with MFA, given Metro's borrowing issues, and other municipalities issues like Surrey, what they're borrowing to look at their infrastructure. Like, everybody's borrowing, it's all cumulative, and we never look at that cumulative number. Councillor Forbes referred to it. I refer to it every year, that total number, and we don't look at it, and we need to look at it. It needs to be in those buckets. We need to understand what the mode shift is when we're spending millions, tens of millions of dollars on transportation. And I'm not saying I'm going to vote against transportation, but I want to understand what the mode shift is, what we've built and what has shifted. Has it shifted at all? Because a couple of years ago, it was quite small, the mode shift from the car into transportation, active transportation, cycling. So we need to understand that information. When I look at page 32 of the presentation, neighborhood parks, new parks in Lynn Creek, Lynn Valley, and outside town centers. When I go to that capital, that bucket of own, I want to look after first what we need to look after with what we already have, rather than spending. And there has to be a balance, and it's not no spending, but there just has to be a more, I've looked, for years, I've looked at what we've spent, and for years it's been like, oh, we're going to look at Kate's Park. We're going to look at Kate's Park. We're going to look at Kate's Park. Well, Kate's Park is the same as when I was 5. It hasn't changed at all, except we've added a monument for those who've served. How do we prioritize projects? Silver, gold, platinum? How do we prioritize what we're going forward with, and what kind of money that are we putting into them? We don't understand that. We've asked that question several times, but I never feel like we get the answer about how that prioritization is. Are there things in the OCP that are more of a priority within the town centers or the projects that we're doing than others? And how can we find those more important priorities and balance them against the things that we need to do work on? Last night, there was a story on the news. Councillor Kirby Young from the city of Vancouver was interviewed in regards to public amenity space. It's disappearing. There's no spaces. And what are we going to do? We're going to tear down Sealand Hall. It's an excellent building for groups coming together. It's a great community building. I get it's going to cost a lot of money to fix it. You and I have had this conversation over the years. I just think it's sad that we want to rip it down and take something that's so useful in a climate like we've got away from a growing community. I really do. I think it's very short-sighted, and I don't agree with it at all. We talk about construction. It's, what is it, a 25% premium in construction if you're living on the North Shore? Do we have to send things out to tenders to certain companies in the way that we do it? Why can't we look differently at how we construct some of these things? Because there is a premium just because we're in North Vancouver. So I'm running out, but I have a few more questions. So I'll put my hand up again.
Mr. Daniluk, responses?
Through your worship to Councillor Murray, just thinking about your first question as it relates to debt limits and borrowing in the region and in the province, we had conversations in the region about what those appropriate limits are. And the community charter does limit us to 25% of ongoing revenue. So there are hard limits in place already for municipalities, but definitely the regional districts are a concern. And we continue to have discussions around that. And we'll bring those back through those regional committees. In terms of improving the information and emphasizing the investments that we're making in existing infrastructure, yes, we can do that. The presentation and the materials tonight does not highlight it. It shows that the total level of investment that's being made in the existing infrastructure, but so we can improve that presentation in the future. But I can assure you that all of those asset management plans that we have in place are designed to make sure that that existing infrastructure is kept up to a standard and they're well documented and renewed every year. In terms of concerns around priorities at the November 14th workshop, we highlighted some of the measures that we would be pursuing to demonstrate to council the progress that is being made over the 5-year plan, and staff will be coming back in the new year to share some of that information.
So I was just going to comment on where we're at in the process. So we have, so the council has had the materials since November 7th. We had the workshop on capital where it was sort of free flow of question and answer and responses back on November 14th. So we're now here for a decision on the capital plan, but I do recognize we do have time. Is council okay with me doing another round of speaking? And next time I'll ask for a vote. So at this point, I'll do a third round of speaking. Councillor Murray, you're the only name on the list. Would you like to speak? Yeah, but I won't go to a fourth without a vote.
Oh, that was from the previous one. Okay. So thank you for the answers to those questions. I would like to request this motion be bifurcated as well. So when we talk about the level of service, we need to understand what level of service we're at now. And again, we don't get that information. We don't truly understand, except in, PowerPoint presentations with a lot of white space. And I get it's high level, I get it. But I always wanted those workshops to be where we could really understand what, break it down, right? Do those tiers, do those levels. So there's more of an understanding. Councillor Pope makes comment in regards to the 1%. When we did that, that was kind of a groundbreaking move in the region when we did 1% for inflation, 1% for operating, and 1% for our capital replacement. It was unlike any other municipality in the region. And we were able to justify that 3% increase always to the taxpayer because we broke it into those 3 buckets. And it was developed by 2 of our councillors that were chartered accountants, or the mayor was a chartered accountant and Councillor Hicks was a chartered accountant. And he was a finance manager for Coquitlam, so he had experience. And it was such a good thing. And, I just think that there's always, again, I go back to, there's always that place where you cut your spending back, you don't tell your kids to dip into their savings when all they want to do is spend. They just got to cut back on their spending, right? And I wish we would use those basic concepts more rather than trying to keep up with everything, because I think it's going to hit us. And, we look at regional government, and ask them to stay in their lane, and we got to stay in our lane too. And we got to stay in, look at utilities is number 1, right? We need to look at our mountainsides, make sure that those culverts are clear and that we can look after them. And then the infrastructure that we've already got, rather than, going out and spending money. The very last page talks about civic facilities and technology. And, I see that word website improvements. And I just wonder when the improvements I never feel like the improvements are getting us anywhere because we have every single year, we have the same criticism of the website. We have the same criticism of communication. And certainly since COVID hit, we had to do everything differently. And I think a lot of us would like to go back to some of the old ways of communication, face-to-face with people in a room, and make it easier for people to get information. As we move forward, it becomes more difficult to get information. It becomes more challenging to access information on a website. Even the simplest things are very challenging. So we asked for some presentation in regards to the website. I think that we were very clear. And again, I only see website improvements. So I don't really know what that means. What are website improvements?
That's Mr. Stewart.
Yeah, that's a number of things. It's looking at technology where we can use technology, including, for example, artificial intelligence, so that staff aren't having to do the work. It's automated and they can do other kinds of things. Probably the biggest shift that's going to happen on the website is a brand new search engine. And I think that's where a lot of the problem lies. It's an old search engine. And so we're going to replace the search engine on that. And then, as I say, with technology, there's no question the workplace has changed. And so we're trying to make some adjustments to better take advantage of technology so we can track and manage the people that are working for us better than we can right now. So there's a whole bunch of things, and it's probably the biggest one for the website is going to be the search engine. You?
The search engine.
When, I think Councillor Forbes just wanted to know, when's that going to happen?
I can't give you an answer. We've got to get the capital budget approved, and then I'll be able to deliver that with a little more definition. But I know we want to start working on in Q1.
So as far as the recommendation goes, I won't be supporting the first part of the recommendation. I won't be supporting 6.5% property tax with an additional 0.5. I will support the second part. I think we need to live within our means. I certainly argue that at Metro, that we need to live within our means. And I sit with a chorus of other politicians around the region that are saying the same thing. I think we're spending a lot of money in a very precarious time in our history. And I think we have to step back, slow down. I think the train's still coming down the tracks, and I have no idea what's going to happen. I think it's frightening in the world right now. I think we just gotta go back to our basics and where we started. I think we have a bit of an identity crisis in the district. And I think we have to figure out who we used to be, because we were in a good, secure place. Right now, we're spending a ton of money, and I think we're spending too much. Mr. Daniluk, I appreciate your honesty, and I appreciate how you come forward and you say, we can do better and we can make this easier to understand. And I'm glad you're at that helm right now. And I'm glad that you're working towards bringing something forward that will be more transparent, so we can really delve into these details and understand exactly where we are as we move forward in this next term. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker I have is Councillors Pope and Forbes. Councillor Pope, your comments?
Quick but significant, I think, question. How much do we need to scale back?
Through your worship, Councillor Pope, a half percentage, if we were aiming for that type of savings, would be $600,000 a year. We're looking at a 5-year capital plan that has much more flexibility than that. So we would be, there are a number of different approaches. My advice at this point is staff will go through the year-end process. There will be opportunities that are identified through that process as we close out projects and update and look for opportunities within this 5-year plan that's in front of council tonight. By the spring, we'll be able to identify those savings. To answer your question specifically, it would probably be in the $10 to $15 million range. in terms of scaling back capital, which is not a significant amount in the 5-year plan.
10 to 15 million out of the $550 million in the capital plan.
So that's what, if we vote in favor, and I feel generally supportive of it, except that I'm not in support of scaling back. And so you're saying the scaling back would be approximately 10 to 15 million.
That range.
We'd be asking you to find. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Worship, Mr. Danny, if the 6.5 plus 5 doesn't pass, what will that mean in terms of how tight you're going to have to tighten up the year again? Is it just that the 0.5 may not happen, like the asset management, which I think is critical because that maintains what we already have. So I would hope that we're not going to lose that. Because if we don't maintain it, it's going to end up costing us more, just maybe a couple of years from now, but we'll get hit harder. So we should maintain it. But I'm just asking, if the 7% doesn't pass, do you have any room that you can, like, what would you do if you don't get 7%?
Through your worship to Councillor Forbes, the 7% is reflective of our reality. And that's why I'm emphasizing it's a realistic budget. The cost structure in municipalities is what it is. We're very infrastructure intensive. We're not increasing costs generally at the rate of inflation because a big component of our cost structure is rising far above inflation. In addition to all the other things that are going on, that is the true increase to sustain and maintain our levels of service. We've not been asked to reduce levels of service. Any municipality in the region that is looking to go below that percentage or within that range, plus or minus a percentage or two, is simply deferring the problem to the future. And I certainly wouldn't recommend doing that. Identifying changes to service levels, we could look at that, but we don't have the information. We're looking to improve that information early in the new year, and it's something that we could plan for the next year if we wanted to start down that path. But what we're saying tonight is staff have identified a half-point savings. We're going to go through the year end. We're going to confirm where those savings are going to be realized, so that we can add an extra half point towards the infrastructure deficit on top of the 6.5% increase to maintain service levels. Not all the municipalities in the region are doing that. We're probably one of a few that are adding for infrastructure in these times because inflation is so high. And so I think it's important to say it is 6.5% to maintain service levels. And we're going beyond that and adding an extra half point to start to renew those contributions for our infrastructure.
Thank you. I agree with what you're saying. And I also think that the 0.5 to maintain our assets over the years is one of the reasons why we've been able to have lower tax rate for property owners, because we have had that little extra to keep things going without having to bump that tax rate so much. So I don't think people really understand, or some people don't really understand what that 0.5, what it means as far as saving us money down the road, what it means as far as the impact on the property owner. There's all those other things that come into that. It's not just we're looking to grab another 0.5%. We're not. There's a reason for it, like you said. So I agree with you that we need to do all the things you're saying. And I trust that your staff, when you relook at this, and the capital staff, when they relook at this, I trust that you're trying to keep it as tight as you possibly can. And also, I'd just like to mention again that it's a difficult job for you because there's so many unknowns, as the mayor said, that we don't have any control over, and we're not going to get them till very late, or late in setting our tax rate. And you can't do it. You can't just pivot in the 11th hour. So planning for some of what we're talking about tonight for 2025, I think really needs to be done. But like I say, you can't do it at the 11th hour. So making everybody aware of these things and then moving forward in maybe 2025 with changes, I think would be good. And thank you.
I know I said I didn't need more time to speak, but
Now you do.
changed my mind. I was just going to say that Councillor Miri asked for the item to be bifurcated. That's completely, we do that. Any member of council wants us to separate the vote. What it's done for me is have me look back over what's been proposed here. The first clause I'm supportive of. The second clause I'm supportive of. The third clause I'm actually having a challenge with voting for that. And the reason is I've been going and telling council members, support the financial plan, support the financial plan. People who have asked to put more stuff into the financial plan, I've told them, please just support the financial plan. And here I'm being asked to say, make a cut. And I've got to tell you, I think we have a plan that does line up well with our OCP goals. It is manageable. Obviously, I have challenges with a lot of the other things that are going to come our way in terms of utility costs and other things in the community. But I come back to that statement of support the plan. And so I will be voting for the first clause, the second clause, and I'll be voting against the third clause for that reason. Councillors Hanson and Beck.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. And I will be voting in favor of the third clause. And I did in that context want to explain my reasons. I also support the plan. And I think that we've developed a lot of excellent ideas for our community and a lot of ideas that are widely supported by the community. At the same time, I am concerned about 7% increases going on indefinitely. I'm concerned about potential increases of coming from Metro and their charges, school taxes that haven't been clarified yet. And I do think it's entirely appropriate that we look at least some options for reducing the spending at the outer end of the 5-year plan, taking into account the overall picture and where we think we're landing, including such issues as what those interest rates are that we're prognosticating. So I think in order to make sure that we have a full range of decisions at our disposal and a full range of information to make them on, it is appropriate that we look at how to tweak to some small measure the spending on the other end of the 5-year plan. So I'll be voting in favor of all three of the bifurcated motions.
I'm glad you raised the question about 7% going forward. Mr. Daniluk, can you talk about the outer years of the financial plan and what tax implications they're likely to have under the current scenario?
I can. Our preliminary look is at, of course, 7% this year, declining down to approximately 5%. And then with our outlook on infrastructure costs, it levels at 4. So 7, 5, 4, 4, 4. That's our current outlook. And that includes what you saw on the slide on closing the infrastructure deficit. So it's an extra 0.5 point this year. And then it increases to 1% per year in the remainder of the 4 years.
Thank you. Councillors Back and Ma.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on the mayor's comments because I tend to agree now that we're looking at this in 3 individual parts. The last piece I'm concerned about as well, given how much time and thought has gone into the 5-year plan and how it does address so many of the priorities that we've addressed as this council and previous councils. So I won't be supporting looking at ways to scale back the outer years of the plan, especially when, as you've highlighted, Rick, that we do expect things to settle out over the next few years. So I'm happy with the first part of this plan, but I just do think there's too many important things, and looking at taking out $10 to $15 million it's not an insignificant amount that's going to affect some of our priorities and things that we do want to see happen over the next 5 years. So I think there's a lot the community has seen this 5-year plan, and they, there's certain things that they're expecting, and I'm not going to support scaling back at this point.
Councillor Ma?
I would like to ask for a little clarification. When I read earlier, it was, 6.5 or 7% to maintain service levels. That's different from capital projects, or am I mistaken there? Can you clarify that?
Sure. Through your worship, Councillor Ma, that maintaining service levels, it's the operating, it's the maintenance of infrastructure, it's setting aside funding for the eventual replacement of infrastructure. It's maintaining the level of investment to support the community when it grows. So those are the things that we're focused on when we're maintaining service levels.
That's the new.
Okay.
Good question. We drill that down a little bit.
Councillor Ma has the floor. You have
So when I
satisfied
look
the
at,
response.
each of those separately, I will support 1, I will support 2. And I just want to look at options. It's not like I'm scaling back, but I want to be able to make it a conscious decision. So I will support all 3.
Anyone still got a third time speaking out there? Okay. I'm prepared to call the question on the matter. Okay, and the request to bifurcate was made, so I'm going to do this in 3 separate votes. The first question to be considered, which was moved and seconded, is that council approve the 2024 to 2028 capital plan. Call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries with Councillor Murray opposed. On the second matter, that staff prepare the draft 2024 to 2028 financial plan based on a 6.5% property tax increase plus an additional 0.5% to address the infrastructure deficit. I'll call the question on that. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Matter passes with Councillor Murray opposed. On the last item, that staff bring back options in April 2024 to scale back years 2025 to 2028 of the capital plan to further address affordability concerns over the 5-year plan. Call the question on that. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion passes with, sorry, I want to be clear about that. You were in favor, correct? Yeah, with Councillors Back, Pope, and Little, and Mayor Little opposed. Okay.
That's right.
And that's it. That was all the items we had for the special meeting. We do have a 7 o'clock regular meeting of council coming up. This gives an opportunity for council to have a bit of a leg stretch and bio break before that meeting. Mr. Stewart, do you have any updates you want for this meeting?
No, Your Worship. I just wanted to mention that we actually have a very, very rigorous decision-making process that goes into capital and projects, and in particular infrastructure and when we replace it and don't. So I'll talk to staff and we'll see if we can get sort of a bit of a briefing point just to remind council. We don't just throw a dart at the side of the wall. We actually have lots and lots of discussions around why this one is more important than that one, and we have a lot of criteria baked into those decision points. So we'll share that with you.
Thank you very much. I'll accept adjournment. Moved by Councillor Forbes, accepted. Thank you all very much. Thank you to staff who prepared the reports and did your presentation today. Appreciate your efforts. And council, I'll see you back here at 7 o'clock. Thank you.